Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rogue Squadron. I am your host here, Philip, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about a movie that is coming out this weekend. A nice little movie to enjoy before the official week of Christmas Eve and Christmas, and then eventually the start of the new year. And that is everybody's little blue friend, Sonic the Hedgehog. And we are going to be seeing Sonic 3 release in theaters. Technically, by the time I'm recording this, like the early screenings for it are tonight, but the official release is going to be December 20th, which is going to be tomorrow on the Friday. So obviously you might maybe wondering, well, Philip, how are you doing this video now? Because the movie hasn't came out yet. Well, it's no coincidence that I have a Sonic shirt on. And because I work at the movie theaters, we were able to actually do a screening for the cast last night. So I was able to see the movie a little early. So obviously, in this little like review and my thoughts and opinions episode, there are going to be some facts that are missing. Obviously, because the first couple of screenings are tonight. Obviously, there is no audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. There is no box office report and everything. So I'll be going over the cast and crew, just kind of giving you an idea of exactly who was in the film, and everything. And then we're going to go into a couple of pros and cons that, I saw while I was watching the film last night. And then I'll just go over my, overall score that I would give it out of 10. Before we dive into that, I just want to thank you guys for all the love and support on these last couple of episodes that I put out. You guys seem to really enjoy the Venom episode, which I was actually really surprised about because obviously it did not get the best of reviews in the theater, but you guys have surprisingly knocked it out of the park, and the view count on that was crazy. So thank you guys so much for all the love and support. It really means a lot. I had to take a little bit of a break last week, so that's why there was no video, but I figure these next couple weeks I will be putting out a lot of episodes to pretty much cover the rest of the month and the month of January, just because I've actually had the opportunity to see a lot of movies. So I wanted to do Sonic first because that movie is obviously coming out this weekend, so I wanted to have something that was a little bit more fresh and present in people's minds. But I will be doing a review and talking about Kraven the Hunter, as well as Gladiator 2, Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, and then was there another movie in there? I might be forgetting another movie, because I feel like I've seen so many movies. But I mean, those are the three movies that I'm thinking of off the top of my head. And then obviously, if I get a chance to see any others, like I do want to go see the live action Mufasa, just to see how that is. And then possibly Nosferatu towards the end of the month. But there are a couple movies that I do have lined up that I want to do little reviews. I'm going to call them like more reviews versus critiques because I'm not really critiquing it. I'm just kind of giving you guys more of the background information. I'm letting you know who the cast and crew is, what the scores are, what the box office score is, giving you a couple pros and cons, and then just kind of like, giving you my opinion and, letting you do what you want with that. But again, thank you guys for all the love and support. Hopefully you are enjoying your holiday season so far. And by the time this episode comes out on Monday, it will be a couple of days before Christmas Eve and Christmas. And obviously all the other, religious holidays that are celebrated that week. So, for those of you that celebrate a whole bunch of, traditions and holidays, I wish you a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. And hopefully you are able to spend time with family and friends and just kind of relax and take in the positivity of the year and try to end the year on a good note. So I'm trying to do that. So hopefully everybody else could do that as well. All right. So without further ado, we are going to get into our review today. So like I said, I saw Sonic 3 last night. Thankfully we were doing a screening for it with the crew. Which is where I picked up this cool shirt. And it was totally worth staying up until like 3 in the morning for it. I obviously had a blast. We'll get into some of the things that I liked and I disliked about it a little bit later, but it was really fun. So I really enjoyed it. So I think we're gonna start out by going over the cast and crew, just in case people kind of forgot who's playing who and whatnot. Like I had a couple of questions because I never really grew up with like the Sonic games and the characters. I was born in '99, so that was kind of a little bit after my time. I just never really grew up as a Sega kid. So now that I've seen, like, the trilogy of Sonic, and I've met people that, like, really like it, and they're, deep into the characters and the lore, it does make me want to look into it a little bit more. But this was a cool experience for me. Obviously I didn't know who voiced who. So obviously we have Jim Carrey reprising his role as Ivo Robotnik, or Mr. Robotnik. We have Ben Schwartz, who is voicing Sonic, followed by Keanu Reeves, who is making his voice acting debut as Shadow. He was one of my favorite characters of the film. He's absolutely phenomenal. We had Idris Elba as Knuckles. We have Colleen O'Shaughnessy as Tails, which is actually interesting because I did not realize that Tails was voiced by a girl. So the more you know. We have James Marden as Tom, and we have Tika Sumpter as Maddie. Really, anybody else? I mean, we have Lee Madjob as Agent Stone. And then really, I guess we just have kind of Christian Ritter as Director Rockwell, and then Tim Butler as Commander Walters. Those are really kind of the only people that you need to know. I mean, obviously, I would just kind of go over like who, all the hedgehogs, and all the important human characters are. We do see Jim Carrey play two roles in this film. I think because the film hasn't exactly come out yet. I'm not going to spoil too much, because I don't want to really talk about it all too much. Well, actually, yeah, I can talk about it because this will come out past the opening weekend. But we do see that he plays himself, so, Ivo Robotnik, and then he also plays his long lost grandfather. So he is absolutely phenomenal in this film. He had me like laughing, like on the edge of my seat. He was great. Um, so that's basically kind of like the cast and crew, all you need to know. Let me see if maybe IMDb gave the movie a score yet, because I couldn't find it at first. I found it for Rotten Tomatoes, I just couldn't find it for IMDb. So let me see if there is some sort of score. Did they give a score? I don't see. I think this is just a bunch of people that worked on the film. So it doesn't look like IMDb gave it a score yet. But we will talk about the scores now. So we will go to Rotten Tomatoes, which is, again, if you are new to this podcast, whether, old or new, we always have a love-hate relationship with Rotten Tomatoes. I could already see that they gave Mufasa kind of a rotten score of 58%, which is pretty interesting considering that they gave something like Terrifier 3 certified fresh at 77%. Um, so, take that as you may. But surprisingly and very happily, obviously, Rotten Tomatoes has given Sonic 3 so far. I mean, again, it hasn't really came out yet, but so far it's given it a score of 86%, which is pretty good. I mean, maybe I want to actually see the other ones. Maybe we can compare it to the other ones if I could spell. And actually, we see that the Sonic trilogy is actually trending in the right direction. We see that Sonic the Hedgehog in 2020 only had a 64%. We see Sonic the Hedgehog 2 that came out in 2022 had a 69%. And then we see that this one has an 87%. So it definitely blew the first two out of the water. And I think the score is very warranted. I mean, I think we'll see a pretty good reaction from the audience. I mean, I'm actually curious to see what the audience ranked the other two Sonic films, just to see if they're going to be in the same ballpark. So let me see. Yes, so the Sonic the Hedgehog film in 2020 had a hot popcorn meter for the audience of 93%. So it was verified, so that makes total sense. And then following Sonic the Hedgehog 2, we can see that it actually had the same at a verified hot at 96% for the audience. Um, so again, I mean, I see this one following suit. I mean, it is definitely going to be crowded. It is going to be a pretty intense weekend and holiday weekend. So I see this movie probably getting the same scores. If not, I wouldn't be surprised if it gave it like a perfect like 99 or like 100%. So it definitely was great. So now that we kind of got familiar with a little bit of the cast and the crew, and we looked at some scores. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe in my next episode that I record, I'll briefly just talk about maybe the box office scores for Sonic. I mean, again, obviously, I don't have that information because the movie hasn't, aired yet or came out. But I'm sure is going to do great numbers. And I will probably tell you in my next episode how the opening weekend and the start of the week has been for Sonic. So you guys will get that idea when I do that. So, now that we kind of went through the cast and the crew, and then some of the early critic reviews, we will now kind of dive into some of the pros and cons. So I think starting off with the cons, to be honest, there wasn't really a lot, if I'm being completely honest. Um, Really, there's only two, and I mean, you could take these two with kind of a grain of salt because everybody's going to be different. One of the first ones was some complex references that they might have made towards like Sega or maybe the Sonic the Hedgehog video game franchise. Now, obviously, if you're a casual viewer, some of these game references might have been too niche, and then obviously potentially alienating those who aren't familiar with the games. Again, this is why you kind of take it with a grain of salt. I mean, even though that I'm not very familiar with the games or whatnot, I didn't really find any of the references confusing. I know enough knowledge to kind of understand like what's going on and who is who. I'm not like a complete like mega fan, so I don't know like exactly everything. But I'm smart enough to kind of piece together two and two. Um, and in all honesty, I didn't really feel like they made too many references. I mean, maybe references to characters or maybe just items, but really nothing that kind of shot out as like I didn't understand that. Like, why did they say that? Um, and again, most people that are seeing this movie are going to be Sonic fans in general. Obviously, you are going to have those casual viewers that just enjoyed the first two movies, so they're going to see the third movie, like myself. But most of the fans are going to be Sonic fans, so they will understand all the references and everything. So this one is not really too much of a con. Again, that's why I said to kind of take these with a grain of salt. I mean, it's not exactly a perfect 10 out of 10, but it comes pretty damn close, to be honest. So like I said, just take this one with a grain of salt. Um, Another one, again, depending on who you are and just what type of humor that you like, there is some over the top humor with Jim Carrey. So Jim Carrey is obviously a highlight of this film. His performance is phenomenal. However, depending on what type of humor you like, it could get a bit exaggerated or silly at the time. Again, that just kind of comes down to personal preference, like, whatever your style of humor is, and what you prefer and what you don't prefer. I've always loved Jim Carrey, from The Grinch, to this movie. He has been absolutely phenomenal. I love him as an actor. So his humor like had me on the edge of my seat. There was one scene where him and his grandfather are like dancing together down a hallway, and that had me like laughing on the edge of my seat. It was just absolutely hilarious, and especially because he plays technically two characters in this film. I mean, he did a phenomenal job for both. So I really did love it. I mean, it was fantastic. Um, and that's pretty much it, really. I mean, that's really kind of all I have for the cons. I mean, again, like these aren't my personal cons. Like when I kind of do these reviews, I kind of like look up like some pros and cons from like Screen Rant or like Rotten Tomatoes or like whatever like people are saying. And I kind of just go over them with you guys. Um, so again, I would just take these two with like a grain of salt. I don't really think there are too many complex references towards the video games in the film, so I don't think people will have to worry about that. And again, depending on if I feel like if you're not a fan of Jim Carrey, you're not going to go see this movie because he is very heavily involved in this film. So obviously, if you're not a fan of him, you're not going to see this film. Most people that are seeing this film, I mean, not only are they a fan of Sonic, but they're also a fan of Jim Carrey. So most likely, it's not going to bother them. But again, everybody's humor is different and what they prefer. So again, he is a big part of this film. He does take up a lot of screen time. But I don't really think he's too over the top or exaggerated. I mean, I think I think he's perfect in the roles that he plays. Um, but yeah, so now that we kind of talked about the cons, we're going to move over to all the lovely pros that this film has, because there is a lot. First one is obviously some much needed improved visual effects. So obviously this movie boasts impressive special effects and animation, making it visually appealing. This is probably one of the best films that I've seen that uses CGI animation. I don't want to say this year, but just that I've seen in a while. None of the characters kind of like look fake. There's no junky CGI compared to like a movie like Craven the Hunter, where you could totally tell that there was like some wonky CGI. In a film like this, that's not the case at all. I mean, it is visually stunning. The use of colors. I mean, obviously all the characters are different colors, and it's very colorful to begin with. But just the use of colors and effects and the action sequences and the fighting. I mean, even though they're just all large, giant CGI battles, um, it's done really well, and it does look really appealing. I mean, I'm curious to see what it would look like on like IMAX or even Dolby, because I think it would just look that much better. Um, Another pro, obviously, is the strong cast. So we see that Jim Carrey obviously continues to shine in his role as dual Dr. Robotnik and Knuckles. No, no, he's not Knuckles. No, don't listen to that. No, he's not Knuckles. But he does continue to shine in his role as Dr. Robotnik, as well as his grandfather. Obviously, all the other characters like Sonic, Tails, Knuckles. I mean, I think Knuckles had me laughing a lot during the film. So all the other characters, they still do a phenomenal job. They bring these characters to life on the big screen. And Keanu Reeves' portrayal of Shadow the Hedgehog has also been well received. I think he is probably the like best person to do Shadow, especially with like the storyline that they kind of gave him in this film. And I think he does a phenomenal job. I mean, like if Keanu Reeves was a hedgehog, he would be Shadow, basically. So I think he does a phenomenal job. I mean, it's not like it's a weird thing where it's like you hear his voice in a hedgehog. I think he's basically like his portrayal of Shadow is basically like how he portrays John Wick in the films. So if you love him in those, you're gonna love him as Shadow, and he does kick ass, and he is just like super cool. He has became my favorite character after seeing the film because he is just so badass, and I was like, yeah, you know what? For no someone that has no idea who these characters are, yeah, he's got me hooked. I love it. So yeah, so it definitely does stem from a strong cast. Even the human characters in this film. I mean, one thing that I did like about this film is that obviously they don't pay too much attention to the human characters. Obviously, unless you're the Robotniks. Other than that, even the human family that obviously Sonic and his friends like live with. They're in the film, for a short time, but the focus is more on the hedgehogs themselves and the Robotniks. They do play a part in the story towards the end of the film. But again, they definitely spend time on the characters that everybody wants to see versus the ones that they don't. Another good pro about this film is the engaging storyline. So obviously the plot is more faithful to the source material, with a mixture of both action, humor, adventure that keeps everybody entertained. They do a really good job with this. I think they keep the storyline pretty fluid and engaging. They give you backstory snapshots into Shadow's past. They give you engaging story arcs and developments with the Robotniks and then with Sonic and Knuckles and Tails. And they do a good job of kind of melding all these stories and all these character developments and arcs into, one cohesive story, and it's not very complicated to follow. So, it definitely, I wouldn't say I was like sitting on the edge of my seat, but it definitely kept me engaged. I wasn't really bored at all, to be honest. I mean, I feel like I was just so enthralled in the story that like it just didn't feel like I sat there for 2 hours, to be honest. Um, so yeah, so it definitely does have an engaging storyline, which is great for people that again just love Sonic and love these movies. Another one is obviously character development, which I just kind of talked about a second ago. So, some characters, especially Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, show good development and chemistry. I wouldn't say so much for Tails and Knuckles. I don't really think they develop too much. I think, if anything, I think both Sonic and Shadow probably have the most development, with their character arcs and stuff throughout the film. I mean, we kind of see like more of a reversal, so we see that how Shadow starts in the film and how he begins in the film, he kind of ends up like Sonic towards the end of the film. And then again, kind of how we see Sonic start out in the film, we see that he kind of turns into Shadow towards the end of the film, but then he comes back to who he is as Sonic. Um, Again, because Sonic and Shadow are kind of like two sides of the same coin, we kind of see like an alternate history of like what if like Sonic got to Earth and instead of finding family, he was trapped in a government facility and experimented on, and didn't have that companionship, or he did, and then obviously it was taken away from him. Um, so again, the development for all these characters is really good, really fleshed out, and I'm just kind of curious to see what they're going to be doing in the future. I mean, obviously, if they're going to be continuing Sonic and these movies, I'm just kind of curious what they're going to be doing. Um, but yeah, I mean, great development all around. And then finally, this is kind of just like an overall statement, but really one of the last pros is that obviously critics have been calling it the best Sonic movie yet. I mean, obviously we can see that by the scores. We're probably going to see that further supported by the audience scores. just obviously praising its action, humor, and overall execution. So, I mean, if we're talking about the Sonic trilogy as a whole, I mean, obviously, this is the best way to round out the movie. I think this is one of the best examples of how a trilogy should be, because we do see that the scores for the trilogy continue to increase, not decrease. So, both like the critic score as well as the audience score, they both continue to rise, which is, extremely important. Um, and like I said, that's where we see like the good to an end, the good end to a trilogy. Again, even if they plan on making more movies for Sonic in the future, if we're looking at the first trilogy, I don't know how far they plan on going with these movies, but if we're looking at the first trilogy that started it all, it is definitely, I don't want to say it's in contention for like one of the best movie trilogies of all time, but I think for video games, because there really hasn't been too many video games that have been tapped into as movies. Sonic is one of the best examples of how to do it. To be honest, um, it was a phenomenal film. I had such a fun time with it. I absolutely loved it, wholeheartedly. I thought it was fantastic. Um, at the end of the day, I think I would give my score for it probably a solid 9 out of 10. I would have to kind of think about it, to see if I would give it like a whole 10 out of 10. There were some parts that maybe were a little slow and maybe I just didn't fully understand and, whatever. And then as much as I love Jim Carrey, there might have been some parts where I was like, all right, like, I get it, Um, but again, I was totally enthralled with the whole entire film. I really got invested in Shadow and, his backstory and his character and just his character arc throughout the entire film. And like I said, all the action sequences, and those moments were animated beautifully. They were done really well. And, like I said, it was just an engaging film. I mean, I was just kind of engaged the whole time. I didn't really lose interest. Yeah, this was a solid 9 out of 10 Suns for me. I would highly, highly recommend. If you can see it in Dolby or IMAX, definitely take advantage of that and try to go see it in Dolby and IMAX if your theater is showing it in that. Just because I think that burst of color and animation would just be even better on those screens. Definitely do not wait to go see this movie. It will be out for a while, so you do have time, but it is going to be extremely popular and extremely busy. So definitely go and see it when you get a chance. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I kind of have to say about Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I mean, like I said, it was a great film, solid 9 out of 10. It is going to slowly make me invested into Sonic, and just kind of have me go down another rabbit hole of my nerdum and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, other than that, that's really all I have to say for today. So before I start rambling, thank you guys so much for coming out to another wonderful episode of Rogue Squadron. If you're wondering where you can find my content and you want to see this podcast even further, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Rogue Squadron. So please subscribe, follow, put those notifications on. So when I post to these social medias, you guys will be informed on when the episodes post. So I really haven't figured out how to do Spotify or any of those other streaming apps. So the podcast is solely on YouTube. So like I said, you guys knocked out of the park with those views. The one thing I do ask is that if you are viewing these episodes and you are watching them, whether they are bots or they're actual people, please don't hesitate to subscribe and put the notification bells on, because I would love to hit like 100 subscribers before the year ends. So if we could do that, that would be phenomenal for this podcast, and we could start off on a great foot starting next year. But regardless, I love all the support that you guys give me. And yeah, I mean, it's very rewarding to do this, and I love to do it. And obviously, you guys love to hear what I have to say and stuff like that. So again, thank you guys so much for coming out to another episode of Rogue Squadron. Like I said, follow us on those social medias. Follow me on those social medias and YouTube, and just look at your feed for the next couple of weeks, because there will be a couple more reviews coming out before the end of the year. But until then, I hope you guys have a great morning, great afternoon, great evening. Please be safe, don't do anything stupid, and then please enjoy your holiday season with your family and friends, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye for now.